My name is Aaron Caldwell, and the moment my uncle tried to turn my grandpa's funeral into his personal Christmas performance, I slid a printed spreadsheet onto the mahogany table at the funeral home and said, "No more mystery money. Not today." The room was packed, black coats still dusted with snow, red and green poinsettias lined up like they were auditioning for a holiday catalog, and the air smelled like coffee that had been reheated one too many times. Grandpa's casket sat 10 feet away under soft lights, the American flag folded neatly at the foot because he'd served, and someone had already started whispering the kind of prayers people say when they don't know what else to do with grief. My Uncle Rick stood at the center of it all like he was hosting a ribbon cutting. He had on a crisp suit, an expensive tie, and a face that said, "I'm the hero of this story." He kept patting shoulders, shaking hands, saying, "We'll take care of everything," like he'd personally built the funeral home with his bare hands. And maybe that would have been fine if I didn't already know what everything meant in our family. It meant he'd stand up front for the applause while my mom and I quietly picked up the bills. It meant he'd insist on making decisions for the family, then expect me to Venmo money by midnight. It meant he'd collect every condolence envelope like he was doing everyone a favor, then disappear into the office to keep it safe. This time, it wasn't just insulting. It was my grandpa, and it was Christmas week. And my uncle thought he could turn a funeral into a fundraiser for his ego. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't even look at the casket, because I didn't want my grief to soften my spine. I looked straight at him and said, "Rick, before you take care of everything, we're doing this transparently. Itemized costs, who pays what, and what happens to the condolence money." His smile froze, not totally gone, just stiff, like a mask that didn't fit right anymore. He chuckled like I'd told a joke. "Aaron, honey, not the time." I nodded. Exactly. Which is why it should have been done right from the start. That was the first time the room shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, but I felt it, the way you feel a door click shut behind you. People turned their heads. My mother's hand tightened around her purse strap, and Rick's wife, Linda, narrowed her eyes at me like I'd just tracked mud onto her white rug. But I didn't come to win a popularity contest. I came to bury my grandpa with dignity and stop my uncle from stealing the last little piece of him that belonged to all of us. Because here's the part nobody saw from the outside. Grandpa had been sick for months. He'd gone downhill fast right after Thanksgiving, right when every store in our small Indiana town had switched to peppermint candles and fake snow displays. My mom and I were the ones doing the doctor runs, the pharmacy pickups, the late-night calls when his breathing sounded off. We were the ones bringing soup, adjusting his recliner, and sitting with him during those quiet afternoons when the TV was on, but nobody was watching. Rick? He came by when the church ladies were there. He showed up when someone could witness it. He'd stroll in with a pie from the grocery store bakery, call it homemade, kiss Grandpa's forehead and announce, loud enough for the whole room, how grateful he was to have such a strong father. Then he'd leave before anyone could ask him to take out the trash. When Grandpa died, 2 days before Christmas, Rick was suddenly everywhere. He called the funeral home first. He spoke to the pastor first. He made a group text titled Dad's Homegoing Arrangements and started typing like he was the CEO of Grief Incorporated. "We'll do it right," he wrote. "Dad deserves the best." Translation? Rick wanted a funeral that looked expensive. Not because Grandpa cared, because Rick cared how people looked at Rick. Within an hour, Rick had already proposed upgrades. Nicer casket, bigger floral sprays, printed programs with glossy photos, a catered reception instead of the church basement potluck, and a special tribute video on a big screen during visitation. My mom, Diane, yes, my mom's name is also Diane, like half the Midwest, read those texts and didn't answer. She just stared at her phone like it was a bill collector. I knew why. Because the last time there was a special tribute in our family, it was my grandmother's service, and Rick promised he'd take care of the costs, then quietly told my mom he was tight that month, and asked if she could cover the funeral home deposit just for now. My mom paid it, and Rick stood up at the reception and thanked everyone for helping us honor Mom, like the money had fallen from heaven. So when Grandpa died, I told myself, not again. I'm a project manager at a medical supply company. Nothing glamorous, but I live in spreadsheets and timelines. I plan budgets for a living. I track down missing numbers like they owe me money. And my uncle? My uncle hates numbers when they shine a light on his behavior. Rick called me that night, voice thick with fake sadness. Aaron, sweetheart, I know you're hurting. I'm handling the arrangements. Just tell me what you and your mom can contribute so we can do this right. Contribute. Not, what can we do together? Not, how do we split this fairly? Just, how much can you hand over so I can look good? I took a breath. Rick, we can talk about costs, but everything needs to be in writing, itemized. He sighed like I was exhausting him. You're making this transactional. No, I said. I'm making it clear. He didn't respond for a second. Then he softened his tone. Okay. I'll send you the details. He never did. Instead, 2 days later, on December 23rd, while Christmas lights still blinked on porches and people were running last-minute errands in ugly sweaters, Rick announced in the family group chat that he'd scheduled the funeral home meeting and had already put down a deposit to secure the date. Then he added, like an afterthought, Aaron, can you send $4,000 by tonight? Your mom can send $2,500. I'll cover the rest. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. He hadn't sent a contract. He hadn't sent an invoice. He hadn't asked my cousin, his own son, to pay a dime. He hadn't asked my aunt on my mom's side, who loved Grandpa too. He went straight to us, like always, because he knew we'd feel guilty if we said no. My mom was sitting on the couch with Grandpa's old flannel blanket folded in her lap. She looked so small. The Christmas tree was still up in the corner because she didn't have the energy to take it down, and the little lights reflected in her wet eyes. When I showed her the text, she whispered, Maybe we just do it. I don't want to fight. That's the trick, right? The way people like Rick weaponize grief. They count on you being too tired, too sad, too respectful to push back. I sat next to her and took her hand. Mom, Grandpa didn't spend his whole life teaching us to do the right thing so his funeral could become Rick's money grab. Her lip trembled. He's your uncle. And Grandpa was my grandpa, I said. If anyone's going to honor him, it's going to be us. With honesty. That night, while everyone else was wrapping presents and watching cheesy Hallmark movies, I opened my laptop and built a funeral budget from scratch. Funeral home services fee, embalming, visitation, transportation, casket, vault, cemetery plot fees, obituary costs, flowers, church donation, reception costs. I pulled average prices in our area from public sources, then left blanks for the actual numbers Rick was refusing to send. At the top I wrote, Caldwell Family Funeral Expense Ledger, Transparency Agreement, Costs, Contributors, and Condolence Funds recorded and shared. Then I added a second sheet. Condolence Funds tracking. Date, name, amount, form, cash, check. Deposited where, used for what. Because I knew what was coming. condolence envelopes, cash, checks made out to cash or the family, and Rick's convenient little, "I'll hold on to it." 2 days later, Christmas Eve, Rick called again. He sounded annoyed. "So are you sending the money or not? The funeral director needs confirmation." "I'll pay my share after I see the invoice," I said calmly, "and after we agree on how condolence money will be handled." He exhaled hard. "Aaron, you're being incredibly cold." I almost laughed. Cold. Like it wasn't cold that Grandpa was gone. Like it wasn't cold that we were even having this conversation while the world outside was singing carols. "I'm being responsible," I said. "Send the invoice." He didn't. Instead, he sent a photo, blurry, angled, of a total on a piece of paper. No breakdown, just a number circled in pen like that was supposed to satisfy me. $13,760. I typed back, "Need itemized, and we need to discuss condolence funds." No response. Then, on Christmas morning, because Rick has a talent for ruining holidays, my mom got a call from the funeral home asking her to confirm payment arrangements. The funeral home called my mother, not Rick, because apparently Rick had put down a deposit with our names as responsible parties. When my mom hung up, her hands were shaking. "Aaron, I can't do this. I can't fight him. Not now." I felt something snap inside me, quietly, cleanly, like a branch breaking under too much snow. "Then I will," I said, and that's how we ended up here. December 26th, the day after Christmas, in the funeral home conference room, with Grandpa's casket waiting outside like a silent witness, while my uncle tried to play Savior of the Year. Rick leaned over the table and lowered his voice, like he was trying to keep me from embarrassing him. "Sweetheart, you don't understand how these things work. People are grieving. Nobody wants to see paperwork." I opened my folder and slid out 3 copies of my spreadsheet. One for him, one for my mom, one for Linda because she'd wedged herself into every decision like a judge. "Nobody wants surprises either," I said, "so we're doing it." Linda's mouth tightened. "This is tacky." "Tacky is taking condolence money in secret," I replied, still calm. "This is accountability." Rick's face reddened. "What are you accusing me of?" I met his eyes. "I'm not accusing, I'm preventing." A couple of relatives in the hallway had drifted closer. My cousin Tyler, my Aunt Sharon, even the pastor who'd come to confirm details. They pretended not to listen, but I could see it. Curiosity, tension, the slow rising interest people get when a family finally says out loud what everyone's been thinking. Rick took the spreadsheet like it offended him. "You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal." "I'm acting like money is real," I said. "And so are bills. Grandpa wouldn't want anyone getting taken advantage of." Linda scoffed. "Grandpa wouldn't want you turning his funeral into a courtroom." I nodded, then said it plainly. "Then stop trying to run it like a campaign." Rick slammed his hand lightly on the table, not hard enough to be dramatic, but hard enough to show he wanted control back. "Aaron, you are making this about yourself." "No," I said, "you are." That landed, because it was true, and truth has weight. Rick pointed toward the casket room like he could shame me with it. "Your grandpa is right out there." "I know," I said softly, and for the first time my throat tightened. "That's why I'm doing this." Then I flipped open the first page. "Here's what we know," I said. "Total quote is $13,760, but you didn't provide breakdown, so I called the funeral home this morning and asked for the itemized invoice, since Mom's name is listed as a responsible party." Rick's eyes widened, just a flicker. You called them? I did, I said, because transparency. I turned the paper so everyone could see. Basic services fee, $2,195. Embalming, $895. Visitation, $450. Transportation, $425. Hearse, $375. Casket, $5,800. Vault, $1,250. Cemetery opening closing, $1,100. Flowers estimate, $750. Printed programs, $220. Video tribute setup, $300. I tapped the page with my finger. Now, you asked Mom and me to send $6,500 combined. That's almost half. You told us you'd cover the rest. But you also told the funeral home you were handling it, and you requested upgrades like the video and the bigger floral package. Rick's jaw clenched. Dad deserves it. He does, I agreed. So let's pay for it fairly. I slid forward the second page. Contributors. Here's what I'm proposing, I said. 3 households. You, Mom, and Aunt Sharon. Split the cost evenly after condolence funds are applied. Condolence money should go toward funeral expenses first. Anything left over goes into a memorial fund for Grandpa's church or veteran charity, something he cared about. Linda laughed like I was insane. That's not how condolence money works. Actually, the pastor said quietly from the doorway, many families do use it to offset costs. Rick shot him a glare so sharp it could have cut wrapping paper. Rick leaned forward. Aaron, you're being greedy. I blinked once. Greedy? For wanting the money people give for Grandpa's funeral to be used for Grandpa's funeral? Linda snapped, louder now, like she couldn't help herself. You're treating grief like a math problem. It's disgusting. I kept my voice even. You're treating grief like a stage. That's worse. Rick's face went hot. Fine. You want numbers? Here's a number. I already put down a deposit, $5,000, so don't act like I haven't contributed. I didn't argue. I simply reached into my folder and pulled out the receipt the funeral home emailed me that morning. I'm glad you brought that up, I said, because the deposit was $2,500. Silence. Not Hollywood silence. Not perfect, dramatic silence. The real kind. The kind where you hear someone's coat fabric shift and the overhead vent hum and the distant sound of someone in another room sobbing quietly. Rick's eyes snapped to the paper. That's wrong. It's right, I said. It's the funeral home's receipt, dated December 23rd, paid by credit card in your name. Amount, $2,500. Linda's eyes flicked to Rick like she was suddenly doing math in her head, too. Rick sputtered. There were other costs. The cemetery deposit was separate, I said. And it wasn't paid yet. They asked who would handle it. Rick's mouth opened, then closed. Because here's what happened in that moment. He realized his usual fog, his usual mix of emotion and urgency and vague promises wasn't working. The numbers were standing in the room now. And numbers don't flinch. Rick tried to recover, voice rising. You're humiliating me! I didn't look away. No, I'm refusing to be manipulated. Linda stood up, chair scraping the floor. How dare you speak to him like that? At a funeral? You are unbelievable. Rick added, louder, aiming for the crowd now. This is what she does. She turns everything into control. She thinks because she has a decent job and a laptop, she can run the family. I felt my heart beat steady instead of racing, like my body had finally decided fear was pointless. I stood too, not towering, just present. "Rick," I said clearly so the hallway could hear, "you wanted to organize because you wanted the spotlight. But you also wanted Mom and me to quietly fund it. And you wanted to privately collect condolence money." Tyler, Rick's son, shifted uncomfortably. He looked like a man who'd been told his whole life to stay out of it. Rick jabbed a finger toward me. "You're making accusations again." "I'm stating a policy," I said. "From this moment on, every condolence envelope gets logged. Cash and checks get counted with 2 witnesses, deposited into a dedicated account, receipts saved, and any spending gets documented." Linda's voice turned sharp and cruel, like she finally let her real opinion out. "So what? You're going to stand there with a calculator while people cry? That's sick. You're the kind of person who would put a price tag on love." I held her gaze. "No, I'm the kind of person who refuses to let love get robbed." Rick's face twisted. He pulled out his biggest weapon, shame. "You're being so money-obsessed it's ugly," he said. "People are going to remember this about you." I nodded once. "Good. Let them remember. I protected Grandpa's dignity." Then Rick did what he always does when he feels cornered. He attacked my character in the loudest way possible, hoping the volume would turn him into the victim. He barked, "You're not protecting anything. You're just desperate to look smart. You're ruining your own family over dollars. Honestly, you should be ashamed to even show your face here." That line, "ashamed to show your face," hit the room like a slap. My mom gasped softly. A couple of distant cousins froze mid-step. Even the funeral director paused in the doorway like he wasn't sure if he should back away or hand me a microphone. I didn't shout back. I did something worse. I opened the last page in my folder. "Okay," I said, voice steady. "Let's talk about Grandpa's wishes." Rick blinked. "What?" I looked around the room, and I let my grief show, just enough that people understood this wasn't petty. "Grandpa asked me to help him with paperwork in October," I said. "He didn't trust Rick with money. Those were his words, not mine." Linda scoffed. "That's a lie." I didn't react. I just slid a copy of a notarized letter across the table. It wasn't a will. It wasn't a dramatic inheritance scene. It was something simpler and, in its own way, more devastating. A prepaid funeral policy confirmation, partially funded. Grandpa had been paying into it quietly. Not enough to cover everything, but enough to make a dent. And attached was a short letter in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. "Aaron, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't let anyone use my goodbye to show off. Keep it simple. Use what I saved. If folks give money, use it for the costs and then give something to the church pantry or the VFW. Don't let it turn ugly. Love you, kiddo." Rick stared at it like it was written in another language. My mom pressed a hand over her mouth, eyes filling fast. The pastor whispered, "Oh, Mr. Caldwell." Rick's face went pale, then blotchy. He wouldn't write that about me." I kept my tone gentle but firm. "He did." Linda snapped. "Why didn't you show this earlier?" "Because I was hoping," I said, "I wouldn't have to." Rick swallowed hard, then tried to pivot again. Fine. We can use the policy. But that still doesn't justify you acting like a forensic accountant at a funeral." I tilted my head. "Then don't give me a reason." He flared up. "I don't need your permission to organize my father's funeral." I answered, "You're right. You don't need my permission, but you also don't get my money without transparency. That's when the room finally chose sides, not dramatically, not with applause, but with the slow, unmistakable weight of reality. Aunt Sharon stepped forward. "Rick," she said quietly, "Aaron is right. We should do this clean." Rick turned on her. "Oh, so now you're against me too?" Tyler finally spoke, voice low. "Dad, I didn't know about the policy." Rick glared at his own son like betrayal was contagious. The funeral director cleared his throat carefully. "We can absolutely provide a full itemized breakdown to the family and accept payments from multiple parties. We also have a standard process for collecting and documenting memorial contributions if you'd like." Rick looked at him like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't, not without looking ridiculous, and that was the thing. Rick's power had always depended on nobody wanting to look ridiculous. He'd relied on everyone's discomfort. This time, discomfort wasn't stronger than truth. So we did it. Right there, while Grandpa waited in the next room, we set ground rules. We agreed the prepaid policy would be applied first. We agreed each household would contribute evenly to the remaining balance. We agreed condolence money would be counted at the end of each visitation night by 2 witnesses, me and Aunt Sharon, or me and the pastor's wife, logged in the spreadsheet, then deposited into a new account my mom opened at the local credit union. Every deposit slip would be photographed and saved in a shared folder. Rick sat stiff in his chair, barely speaking, like a man forced to watch someone else drive his car. Linda kept whispering insults under her breath, little jabs like control freak and heartless. But the words were losing oxygen in the room. And when the first visitation night happened, something almost funny occurred. People brought envelopes, lots of them. Grandpa was loved. He'd been a high school custodian for 30 years, the kind who fixed broken chairs and slipped kids extra hot chocolate packets in winter. He'd helped neighbors shovel driveways. He'd volunteered at the church fish fry every Lent, wearing that same faded apron like it was armor. So the envelopes piled up, and Rick hovered near the card box like a hawk. At one point, he reached for it and said, "I'll take that into the office." I stepped in front of the table, polite smile, steel spine. "Nope, it stays here until counting time." His eyes flashed. "Aaron." I didn't budge. We agreed. He stared at me for a long second, then stepped back like he'd just realized people were watching. And they were. Because once you show a room what manipulation looks like, they start noticing every little move. That night, after everyone left and the funeral home staff dimmed the lights, we counted. Aunt Sharon sat with me at a small table. My mom sat nearby, exhausted, holding a tissue. The pastor's wife brought us paper clips and a calculator, like she'd done this before for other families who didn't trust themselves. We opened each envelope, logged the name and amount. Checks, cash, a few cards with just handwritten notes and no money, which honestly felt more tender than any bill. When we finished, the total was $6,840. My mom whispered, "Oh my God." Rick's face tightened like he'd just lost a bet. Linda said too quickly, "Well, that should cover everything then." I nodded. It covers a lot, and it will be used exactly as Grandpa wanted. We deposited it the next morning. Receipt photographed, spreadsheet updated, shared folder synced. By the time the funeral day arrived, December 28th, the snow had softened into that quiet, thick kind that makes a town feel like it's holding its breath. Christmas decorations still hung on lampposts downtown, and the radio was still playing holiday songs in between weather reports. We had the service at Grandpa's church, the same one where he'd sat in the 3rd row every Sunday, humming off-key to hymns he'd known since childhood. Rick insisted on giving a eulogy. Of course he did. He stood at the podium in front of the nativity scene that was still set up from Christmas Eve. Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus watching this whole mess. And he spoke about Grandpa like he'd been the center of Grandpa's world. He talked about being there, about family unity, about honoring Dad the right way. And if I'm honest, for a few minutes, I almost let myself believe him. Because grief can soften you. It can make you want to pretend people are better than they are, just so the loss hurts less. Then Rick said, loud and proud, "And I want to thank everyone for the generous support you've given our family. Every bit helps, and we're grateful." He didn't look at me. He didn't look at my mom. He looked at the crowd like he was soaking in praise. When the service ended and we moved to the church basement for the reception, because yes, we kept it simple, like Grandpa asked, people hugged my mom, shared stories, ate ham and scalloped potatoes, and those funeral potatoes everyone pretends they don't love but absolutely demolishes. That's when a sweet older woman named Mrs. Donnelly, one of Grandpa's longtime church friends, pulled me aside. She whispered, "Honey, I put a check in the envelope last night. Did you get it?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We logged everything and deposited it this morning. Thank you." Her eyes widened. "Logged?" I smiled gently. Grandpa wanted it handled responsibly. Mrs. Donnelly patted my hand. "Good, because I've seen families fight over money at funerals. It's ugly." I didn't answer. I just felt my stomach turn because, yes, it is. And then Mrs. Donnelly added, "I hope your uncle doesn't try anything foolish." I blinked. "Has he?" She leaned in closer. "I heard things, sweetheart. After your grandmother's funeral, people talk." I felt my face go cold. So it wasn't just me. It wasn't just my practical brain. Other people had noticed. Other people had whispered. Rick's face had been bought with everyone else's discomfort. And now, because of a spreadsheet, that discomfort finally had a place to go. After the burial, standing in the freezing wind while the flag was folded and handed to my mother, Rick pulled me aside near the parking lot. Cars were lined up. Snow crunched under shoes. Breath hung in the air like smoke. His eyes were hard. "Happy now?" I looked at him. "Do you hear yourself?" He stepped closer, voice low and angry. "You made me look like a thief." I held his gaze. "If transparency makes you look guilty, that's not my fault." Linda stormed over, cheeks flushed from cold or rage, maybe both. "You have been unbearable all week," she hissed. "You turned a funeral into an audit." I didn't flinch. "I turned it into what Grandpa asked for." Rick's voice sharpened again, the mask falling. "You know what you are? You're the kind of person who would count pennies at a graveside. You can't stand the idea of someone else leading. You needed to prove you were better than me." I shook my head slowly. "No. I needed to prove you can't take advantage of Mom anymore." That landed like a punch. Rick's eyes flicked to my mom across the lot, small, grieving, holding a casserole dish someone had wrapped in foil for her to take home. Rick's voice dropped, almost venomous. "If you keep this up, you're going to end up alone." "People don't like a woman who makes everything about money," Linda added. "You're going to regret humiliating us. You think you won something? You just poisoned your own family." I took a breath. The wind cut through my coat. Christmas lights blinked faintly on a nearby house like the world was mocking us with cheer. Then I said, calmly, "Here's what's going to happen next. I'm sending everyone the final ledger tonight. The condolence funds will pay the remaining invoice balance. Any leftover, per Grandpa's note, will be split between the church pantry and the VFW. Receipts will be included. And if you don't like it, you can explain to the family why you wanted it handled privately. Rick's nostrils flared. You wouldn't. I already did, I said. His face tightened. Linda looked like she might explode. You are unbelievable. I nodded once. I know. Grandpa always said I got my stubborn from him. Then I walked away. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, still littered with stray wrapping paper from Christmas that we never properly celebrated, and I finalized the numbers. Total funeral costs after the prepaid policy, $9,410 remaining. Condolence funds deposited, $6,840. Remaining balance, $2,570. Aunt Sharon contributed $857. My mom contributed $857. Rick contributed $856. Yes, I made it exact. Because if Rick was going to be part of this, he was going to be equal. When the final condolence total was tallied after the service, because more envelopes came in at the church, we ended with a surplus of $1,260. I wrote 2 checks, $630 to the church food pantry, $630 to the VFW post Grandpa used to visit. Then I uploaded copies of everything, deposit slips, invoices, check images, into the shared folder and texted the link to the family group chat. No speech, no drama, just a sentence. Final ledger plus receipts uploaded. Condolence funds applied to costs per Grandpa's wishes. Remaining donated to pantry plus VFW. For a while, nobody replied. Then my cousin Tyler texted privately. Thank you. Seriously. Dad's been weird about money forever. Aunt Sharon sent a single heart emoji. My mom came into my kitchen, looked at the open laptop, and quietly wrapped her arms around me. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I'd protected her. Not just from bills, but from being treated like an ATM with a pulse. A week later, the fallout hit. Rick showed up at my mom's house unannounced, furious that people were talking. Apparently, at the grocery store, someone had mentioned how organized everything was. At church, someone thanked my mom for handling it so responsibly. Rick didn't get the credit. And that was unbearable to him. He accused my mom of letting me control everything. He demanded she tell people he paid the most. My mom, still in her grief, still fragile but changed, looked at him and said, Rick, if you want people to admire you, earn it. Don't steal it. He stormed out. Linda unfriended half the family on Facebook like it was a political protest. But something else happened too, something I didn't expect. Relatives started calling my mom more, checking in, bringing food, offering help. Not because of Rick's performance, but because the whole week had reminded them what real support looked like. My mom started saying no more often, to guilt, to pressure, to being the default caretaker who pays the emotional and financial cost for everyone else's comfort. As for me, I didn't become some cold villain in the family the way Rick predicted. I became the person who told the truth. And that's lonely sometimes, especially in families that survive by pretending. But it's also freeing, because Christmas came again the next year, and for the first time, my mom decorated without that tight, anxious look in her eyes. We put Grandpa's photo on the mantle beside a small flag pin and a simple candle. We cooked his favorite roast. We played the old recordings of him laughing at the end of family videos. And we didn't spend a single minute worrying about what Rick thought. Some families measure love in appearances. Mine finally learned to measure it in integrity. And if there's one thing I'll carry from that snowy Christmas week funeral, it's this. Grief doesn't excuse secrecy. Love doesn't require silence. And if someone calls you practical or selfish just because you demand fairness, it usually means the old system was working great for them. For Grandpa, I didn't give Rick a stage. I gave our family the truth. And that was the cleanest goodbye I could offer.